Hi, I'm Erin, and I just want to share about God's grace through our story of adoption. When I felt called to adopt, we were on our way home from a vacation, and the vacation had been so easy, so peaceful. It was just the four of us, and the whole week I kept thinking, wow, this life is really getting simple. It's comfortable. We're out of tantrums. We're out of diapers, and it was just felt, everything was going smoothly. And we had so much love in our family. And Lily and Lennox were getting along beautifully. It was wonderful. And so when we're on our way home, Andy's driving. I'm just killing time reading. And I'm reading a book that has nothing to do with adoption at all. But there was just one little line in there about adoption. And as soon as I read that, it was literally like I was hit with a ton of bricks. God was like, this is what I want for you. I want this for your family. And I was immediately excited and also very scared because Andy and I had already talked. We were done having kids. We were happy with our situation. So I remember the rest of that drive kind of holding my phone sideways, like looking up information on adoption. And I mean, it was just like this seed in my heart was exploding so quickly. And I was so scared to say anything to him about it. And so that kind of set the course for the next month and a half where I just prayed alone that if this is what God wanted for our family, He would prepare Andy's heart, because I did not want to bring anything up that would make him feel pressured or resentment down the road. I wanted to make sure that we were absolutely clear this is what God wanted for us to do. But I waited. And when I could not wait anymore, I had talked to a friend that gave me counsel, like, well, why don't you just put it out there, and see. And we were actually sitting on this very couch, and I took one of these pillows, and I was like, I need to tell you something. And I was hiding behind the pillow. I was so nervous about what he was going to say. And I just said, I really feel like God wants us to adopt. And I'll never forget that I looked over at him, and he didn't even bat an eye. It was just like as calm as the next breath, like no surprise, just like he knew it was coming. And it was really special. And then I said, and I'm pretty sure we need two. And again, I mean, he knew it. He said, you know what, I've been wondering if maybe our family needs to grow a little bit more, and I've been thinking about this as well. So it was really perfect. And then we prayed some more. And about a month later, he finally gave me the go-ahead to start the process. So we picked an agency, and then you look at what countries that they had available. And we knew we wanted an African country, and Burundi was the only one, believe it or not, that had a program at the time. And it was a brand new pilot program. It was a really good time to get into it. So from December of 2015 to July of 2016, so basically 7.5 months, it was mountains of paperwork, references, scouring of our past, all kinds of questions, psychologist appointments, doctor's appointments, all kinds of notary, everything you could think of, and not to mention, a lot of finances as well, but just a very, very in-depth process. And it was always very hurry up and wait, a lot of patience. And then in July of 2016, we finished what's called our dossier, and that got mailed to Africa, and then we waited. And we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And the thing that was unique about Burundi is that they have a committee that makes matches, and they only meet every so often. So it's not like someone is always pairing families and kiddos together. You have to wait until the special group of people meets. And they were supposed to meet quarterly, but it ended up being more like every 6 months. So a meeting would come, we would wait and wait, we wouldn't have a referral. And so it took quite a long time till October of 2017, about a year and 3 months later, before we had been matched. We never looked back once we got started, and I think the adoption process kind of lends itself to that. In a way, the paperwork and the requirements are essentially kind of like a weed out program, and we were in it. We were vested. We knew this is what we wanted. We knew we wanted 2 children, and we were actually told that it would be highly unlikely we would get 2 because of the standards of the age requirements that they would have to be the standards that were put onto us. So the fact that we ended up with 2 little boys about 11 months apart was also part of God's divine plan. Like, I just knew in that vision from the start, this is 2 children that we're talking about. So we were in it for good. Some biblical truths that I clung to, again, just that God would fulfill what he started in us. Just that God is our ultimate planner. In his heart, a man plans his course, but the Lord directs his steps, right? We can have these visions for our lives, and that's good. I think God is a God of order and a God of planning, but you always have to go being willing to be flexible to God's plan and being willing to say yes, and just remembering that no matter what God asks you to do, his plan is so much better than anything you could have imagined yourself. So do it, go for it, and you will be blessed. So in the process of adopting and actually meeting the boys, the challenges were not few. They were many. And we were ready for that a little bit. It's just like having any child, whether it's biological or adopting. You read the books, you hear the stories, and you're mentally preparing, but no one can describe it perfectly until you're going through it. So, getting to Africa was fine. Getting there was pretty easy. Meeting the boys the first day at the orphanage was a delight, although it was definitely eye-opening of, wow, this was their everyday life, kind of raising themselves, living in a not great environment, not having a lot of love, or anything like that. So it was very eye-opening. We actually got to tour the market where they were found, and it's just really hard to imagine what that would have been like. So as soon as we brought the boys back to the hotel with us, they were kind of awestruck at first, right? I mean, they're getting gifts from us and they're liking that, but as soon as that newness wore off, which was probably by the next morning, the sin nature of all of us starts coming out. And it was very challenging. The hardest challenge I've ever been through, to be in another country where I don't speak the language. I'm out of my comfort zone, and I have 2 children that honestly hate me at the time, or at least think they do. And they're taken away from everything that they've ever known. We actually had to leave the next morning for Kenya, so it was very, very fast. And the challenges of just the rage that they had of not understanding what was happening to them, and rightfully so. And then Andy and I just growing homesick for our children at home, who we knew would shower us with love. It was a very challenging time where we were so dependent on the Lord, on our knees many times through the tantrums. Boys are tantruming over here, and Andy and I are on our knees crying here, and just crying out for the Lord to comfort us. And he really did in so many ways, whether it was playing music. We were in a mall in Kenya where no one speaks English, but believe it or not, there was a Chris Tomlin song playing in the mall on this particular day, and it was just amazing. God just broke through these different barriers. Or sending missionaries to help comfort us that were at the lodge we were staying at. So there was many times that he was just comforting us. But I think the biggest challenge was just the boys. They were terrified, and it was manifesting itself in a lot of really hurtful and harmful ways. So when we came back to the States, on one hand, there was so much relief to be home where the rest of our family was, where our support system was. And that felt very good to be back just to our normal surroundings. But it definitely did not get easier at first. We had this grand plan of cocooning, is what all the books tell you to do, to really kind of lock yourselves in and just learn the family unit, while somehow in Africa I contracted pneumonia. And so 1 week home and I was in the hospital with pneumonia. And Andy was on his own with these boys. So the first week or so was really, really hard. There was a lot of friction with our oldest son, because these boys didn't have an older brother, and now they're coming underneath someone else, and that was very challenging for them. And there was a lot of friction there, and that was really hard for me to watch my biological children be mistreated or hurt. And I'm thinking, what have I done? And I honestly really think, looking back, that I was going through a little post-adoption depression, which I never knew was a thing. I never knew that. Nobody ever told me that. You hear all the time about postpartum depression, and that's a very widely accepted thing. And I learned that this is a thing, and that was helpful because it was so many emotions, bringing them back home and having them adjust. And it's taken a long time, but it's been great. God has changed me more and more all the time to become more dependent on Him. I mean, I've been dependent on the Lord, but there's that song, Lord, I need you. Every hour I need you. And every time we sing that song at church or I hear it on the radio, in my heart I'm thinking every second. Like hour? No, that's like a super Christian. I need you every second, every second. So many times I'm calling on the Lord for wisdom. So much time spent on my knees saying, what do I do now? Or popcorn prayers in the midst of getting ready to respond to a child. What do I do now? But I love how in James it says, when you ask for wisdom, God will give it to you. But then don't waver. Don't think, did He give it to me? Did He not give it to me? He did. And sometimes I still mess up, but I'm also learning. Sometimes the bigger lesson is letting my children see my humility in apologizing for my mess up. And it doesn't mean that just because I ask for wisdom, I'm going to handle everything perfectly. God has shown me His grace through this experience because first of all, I really don't even know why I was chosen for this, why Andy and I were chosen, but it's been such a blessing. And I can see every day the changes that God has done in my boys' hearts. I pray specific verses over them depending on their specific situations and the things that I can tell that they struggle with, some more than other. And every day it's just amazing to me to look back on where we are versus where we used to be. And that's the whole Christian life, is where are you now versus where you used to be. And they've got a long ways to go, and so do I. But I can just see God softening their little hearts. They're loving to be a part of a family now. And so God's grace is just all over that. And I'm really, sometimes I think Andy and we think we scare people away from adoption sometimes because the struggle was real. But the blessing has been immense. And if that's something I could communicate to other people, is don't be afraid of the struggle. Because in the struggle, God has shown so much more real, so much more powerful. And I would never, if I had to do it all again, I would do it in a heartbeat. Because watching what God is doing in these little boys and what He's done to our family and how we've grown has just been amazing. I'm Erin Hayes, and this has been my story of God's grace through our adoption.